Allie Zendrian, founder of A to Z Communications, and welcome to my Brand Stories podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to brands and how they're created. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with Tony Steuer. He's a financial preparedness expert and author and podcaster. We had a lot of great conversation around branding issues within the industry, particularly related to insurance and regulators, that I think you will really enjoy. Tony, welcome to Brand Stories podcast. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So the first question that I ask everybody is, what's your favorite brand and why?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit differently here. I'm going to go with a person. I'm going to go with Warren Buffett. And what I admire about Warren Buffett is that for the most part, you know what he stands for. He's very consistent. He shares his thinking. So I think as a person, if we're building our personal brand, he's somebody that we can look to in doing so.
Yeah, you know exactly when you say that name, what he stands for and who he is. So great pick.
Yeah, well, thanks. He's a favorite of mine.
Backtracking a little bit. So if you could tell the audience a little bit about your work and how you interact with different fintech and financial services brands.
Well, I started out a few years ago as a life insurance salesperson, and then over the course of the years, I became a fee-based insurance consultant working predominantly with wealth management advisors, litigation attorneys, trust officers. So working across the financial services spectrum as part of the planning teams. And what I found was there wasn't always a lot of communication between the different team members, and there wasn't a lot of really checking in about the different financial services and products that people had. So this started to lead to either people not having the right products, people getting turned off about the financial services industry. But a lot of what came up was that there was an educational gap, and not only an educational gap with consumers, but it was an educational gap within the industry. Even though people might be an investment specialist, they wouldn't understand things about insurance or, estate planning or anything else. So I became really interested in educating other people in financial services and helping to bridge the gap between different financial advisors, accountants, whatever the name is, but helping everybody get together and get on the same page.
That's great. And as you know, very much needed, especially since the KITS' fintech map is becoming more and more like an eye chart every time that you look at it. How do you go about doing that education? Is there a certain method that you do it, or does it depend on the client?
Well, generally what I'm doing now is I'm advising a couple of financial technology companies, but what I'm doing is I have a podcast as well, is I try to talk to people who are from different facets of the financial services world. And what I really try to do is talk to some of the usual suspects on my podcast, but I also try to talk to people who are very unique and diverse to try to really help us shift the way we're thinking about each other and the way that we're working with each other. So that's a big part of what I do. I talk a lot about insurance because there's not a lot of people out there talking about the role of life insurance and planning rather than just, hey, trying to sell life insurance. It's more like, well, we need to review insurance because it really is the foundation of a sound financial plan. So that's a lot of what I talk about.
That's great. So as far as bringing those groups together and educating them about insurance, so obviously now that's your brand. How have you gone about developing that, and how do you feel like it's changed over the years, if at all?
Well, how I went about developing it was slowly. So that's always the advice I give anybody is as you're building your personal brand, it's the sum of everything you do over the years. So how I built mine was through my own personal practice, through doing speaking. I've been writing. I think the first time I was published was in the early 1990s. So I've been doing this for a little while. But what somebody, a mentor said to me was the best advice I received on this. And he said to always be consistent with who you are. And that gets back to what we were talking about with Warren Buffett. So if you go back and look at something I wrote, I guess 30 years ago, you're going to find that it's very consistent with what I say today. And how I've evolved is through the different learning processes. I've tried to gather different viewpoints. So work directly with clients, The majority of my work was with different advisors, but I also spent 8 years on the California Department of Insurance Curriculum Board. So I've also gotten a viewpoint of regulators, and they're often left out of the conversation. But regulators play a very important role in financial services in trying to help sort of wrangle the products that are out there, how they're sold, how consumer complaints are dealt with. They try to bridge a gap. They're underfunded, understaffed. So it's part of that, but it's seeing that whole spectrum. Then the other component for me was the litigation consulting. And unfortunately, I got to see the bad side of things, the underside of the industry. Now, there are 100% financial predators out there. But a lot of the times what I saw in litigation cases and also some of the things with the Department of Insurance was it was a misunderstanding that something could have been explained in a different way, or it was simply just a matter of a poor product fit where somebody didn't take the time to really understand what the customer wanted and get them the product that they needed. They were in a hurry to do this, or they had a certain product that they were trying to sell. They go in there thinking product first rather than solution first. So that's the sum of how I build up my brand. Now, as part of that is I've become known, hopefully, for integrity and for speaking the truth. For people who know me, who are listening to this, know that I tend to speak my mind, and I don't always say the popular opinion, especially when it comes to life insurance. Life insurance is not an investment, it's an insurance contract. And it's something I say, but that is not always popular in the insurance industry. So my advice to anybody who's building up your personal branding is find your voice, find what you believe in, and don't be afraid to express your beliefs.
I give you credit because you're right. Especially if you're giving that unpopular opinion, it's easy to want to be liked by everybody and then to want to say the thing that is popular or will be liked or whatnot. So I give you credit for sometimes taking the opposite opinion of things and sticking to it.
Yeah, it's not always the easy thing to do, but I think that people respect you. One, it helps build your brand because people know who you are and they know what you stand for. But it's a lot easier to go through life knowing that you're saying what you believe, that you're following your beliefs. And I think that's something in the financial services industry that, as you said, it's like being in school. Everybody has this group think, like we're all supposed to think certain things. Like we're supposed to think, for example, annuities are bad. I come back to insurance a lot because that's sort of my area of expertise, but that's common thinking in the industry. Annuities bad.
Right.
But that's not always the case. There are certain times where annuities make sense for certain people. And I think that's the danger of groupthink, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's very important to educate people about. So another point that you had made earlier was the diversity of thought and trying to get all of that together. So especially given our industry, I appreciate you wanting to do that. How do you feel like you're able to bring that about? And do you have any tips as far as how the industry could be better about it?
Well, first, listen. Um, that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing is to not be afraid to talk to people who are not like you. That's also a big thing. I think the other huge thing in this industry is that we have to remember there's women in this industry. There's women in the world. When we look at CFPs, less than 30% of CFPs are women. The percentages of advisors in total are the same, but yet women make up 50% of the population. So I think it's really important that I try to have a lot of women on my podcast, women who are role models, women who are changing the industry. And what we're seeing is a huge shift in a sort of behavioral finance led, non technical part of the industry. While a lot of the industry is that historical, I don't want to say patriarchal led thing, but where we're talking about investment returns and all those other things and like which mutual fund has the lowest expense ratio, instead of focusing on the bigger solutions and what our clients are trying to achieve. So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing too is I try to promote people of color, other underrepresented communities, because we come back to the CFPs, and I think 1% of CFPs are Black women. but that's a huge underrepresentation of the American community. And I think we do ourselves a disservice and we wonder how come all these people aren't turning to the financial services industry. And it's because we don't talk to them. We don't try to understand who they are. We don't understand what they want. And so I think we have to listen and try to understand people who are not like us.
Absolutely. I mean, that is part of a branding issue, basically. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to make things better, and I think we're taking little steps. It would be nice if we took bigger steps, but it is what it is. Another thing that you had mentioned was working with the regulators, and it seems like they also sort of have like a branding problem of just always seeming like the bad guy and out there to make things more difficult. How do you think that the industry should be looking at them in a way that's a little bit more fair?
Well, I think one is trying to understand that they have a job to do. Fortunately, a lot of the best talent leaves the regulators for private industry. So a lot of times you have sometimes maybe not the people who are at the top of the profession, or they're people who are learning. They have a lot of young people because that's where a lot of people enter the industry before they get the high paying jobs in the private industry. So that a lot of times they're also learning. The other thing is they have a lot of ground to cover, and we can oftentimes, it's easy to look at, okay, if your firm gets audited, it cannot be a fun experience, but at the same time, it's a learning experience, and you have to take the consideration that it's helping the consumer, and that even though you as an advisor are almost certainly doing everything in the right way, we all know that there are bad actors out there, and the only way the bad actors are going to get caught is if the rest of us in the industry who are doing good allow the regulators to do their job and to support them in doing their job. So that's how I think we should think about what the regulators are trying to do, is to remember that they're trying to do the right thing in most cases.
You come across as being so like even keel and just understanding, look, it's an ecosystem and we all play a role. Did you grow up that way, or how was it that you came to become this kind of person?
I've always been exposed to different people and different cultures, and I think that's part of it. So I never quite understood why some people weren't like that. I don't know
Yeah.
if I was raised that way, if it's just part of my personality, but I find other people interesting. I find other cultures interesting. I'm curious about people. So I think that's part of it. But part of it is just the more you talk to people who are not quite like you, per se, however you define like you start to find out that we're really all the same, and that you can connect with different types of people. And I think that's the thing. And it's even like we talk about in the insurance industry, there used to be this thing like, well, they work for the company. They're not out in the field doing things. And we get that. And we have that with fee-based planners versus planners who are taking a commission and all these things. We tend to click up. And that's, I think, human nature. But once we start to see like, okay, well, how can we work together? It becomes a better experience for everyone. And so that's kind of it for me.
Well, I'm glad that people like you exist. So whether it is your
Thanks.
the way that you grew up or whatnot, good job to you.
Thanks. It's all the people in my life. That's what's made the difference.
So as far as the industry's branding and how it can become a little bit better, we talked about diversity, we talked about the regulators and whatnot. How would you encourage people within the industry and the industry as a whole to fix its branding and become a little bit better?
Well, I'll go back to listening and trying to understand the problems that people are trying to solve instead of just continuing to throw out solutions that nobody is asking for. Um, the way I liken it is that if you go to the doctor's office, the doctor doesn't walk into the room and say, okay, great, let's get you scheduled for knee surgery, which is sort of how the financial services industry approaches things. Instead, the doctor goes, well, let's do a little bit of a workup and see what you're in here for. And then I'll check out your symptoms and then I'll make a diagnosis. And so I think that we as an industry, and especially as advisors, is that we need to get rid of preconceptions when we talk to our clients. And this gets back to, I think, I don't want to generalize between men and women, but I know in my career that usually women have been more interested in solving a particular problem. For example, making sure their families are comfortable, that their kids are taken care of, that their spouse is taken care of. They're solving problems. Where the men tend to be like, okay, well, show me what the best product is. Where am I going to save the most money? Where am I going to have the best return? And I think we need to, as an industry, get to solving problems, because when you're solving problems, then people really understand what you're doing. And I think that's the other big thing, is that knocking off the jargon. That turns people off. When you think about it and you go to talk to somebody, and again, we'll take a doctor as the best example. If you do need a knee replacement, the doctor's not going to say, okay, well, these are 20 different types of knee replacements that you can get. We're going to go through each one and talk about the pros and cons of each type of knee replacement. The doctor may give you a choice between two different courses of action, but the doctor will give you just a highlight of those two courses of action without expecting you to become a qualified expert in understanding different types of knee replacements. So I think that's the other big thing, is we need to drastically simplify what we're offering to consumers.
So it seems like in our industry and probably just in general, sometimes as people are trying to figure out their path in life or trying to develop that next thing, to your point, it's sort of, I feel like this is a good idea versus figuring out what the problem is and saying, okay, well, the solution to this might be XYZ. So I should work on the solution to the problem versus a thing.
Yeah, see what's going on in your community, in your target audience. Like, I was talking with somebody this morning. She's a financial coach, but she comes from the creative world. She was an actress and a director. And so we were talking about who she could work with her clients. And I'm like, well, you actually have your answer right there. Those are your best clients because you understand the challenges that they're trying to solve. Actresses have certain different financial challenges than, let's say, doctors, for example. Again, it gets back to that thing of understanding your clients and the problems that they're trying to solve. And once you do that, is you completely change the nature of your relationship. And for everybody watching and listening, think of the best advisors in your office. And if you're a bigger firm, I don't know if people still use the term rainmaker, but you think about the rainmaker in your firm, and they're the person who can go out there and form relationships and make connections. And think about how they're able to do it, because it's just in that word, they're making the connection. So think about how you can make connections.
Love it. As a last question, so you mentioned your love and experience in insurance. So that seems like an area also that you say insurance and, like you said, annuities. That's horrible. How can the insurance industry become that place where we understand there's a purpose for things, and maybe some things are good, maybe they're not good, but we all need to figure that out for ourselves?
I think the insurance industry has forgot its purpose, or it doesn't care about its purpose. The bottom line is insurance is about transferring risk, and it does that very well. And if the insurance industry just concentrated on the fact that it is a risk protection industry, I think it wouldn't be hurt financially at all. And it would have a better reputation with people, because everybody out there watching and listening has had a bad experience with a life insurance agent. And it's almost always because that life insurance agent tried to sell them a cash value insurance policy when they just needed term life insurance to take care of their family.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. I hope that this is incredibly educational for lots of different people.
Thanks for having me on, Alexander. This is fun. Appreciate it.